Is teaching destroying the mental health of teachers who care the most? I can remember years ago, before I was ever in education, I used to think that teachers had it made. They had every single federal holiday off. They have summers off. They are usually off in the middle of the year at wintertime or at Christmas time for about 2 weeks at a time. Usually get a week off at Thanksgiving. Not everybody does, but most teachers get a week off at Thanksgiving. They get a spring break. And I used to think, man, teachers have all this time to take care of themselves, to spend with their families. And then I became a teacher. And when I became a teacher, I learned something that you'll never learn in a handbook. It's not going to be in your employee manual. It's not going to be in your EDU classes, and your administrator is never going to tell you this. What I learned is that there are unspoken rules in education. In this video, we want to talk about an unspoken rule that is destroying the mental health of teachers nationwide. What teachers are experiencing emotionally and mentally, it's not rare. It's not dramatic, and it's not exaggerated. Rather, it's actually very measurable. Because right now in the teaching profession, over 50% of teachers report the symptoms of burnout. Teachers report a higher level of anxiety and depression than the general workforce. Nearly 2/3 of teachers identify teaching as a primary source of chronic stress in their life. Teachers experience higher emotional exhaustion than similarly educated professionals. And fewer than half of teachers believe that they're safe to openly talk about some of the mental health struggles that they have while they're at school. And one of the interesting things is that as it relates to burnout and mental health, the burnout rate of teachers is 15 points higher than it is for law enforcement, nurses, and social workers. This is not me trying to make this a bigger deal than what it is. It's not rare. I'm not being dramatic, but it's 100% measurable by the statistics. I've told this, I don't know how many times, but a little over 3 years ago, I woke up and my face was completely paralyzed. I thought I had a stroke. My kids thought I had a stroke. The kids at school thought I had a stroke. Everybody thought I had a stroke except for my doctor. And he says, John, he says, you didn't have a stroke. He said, but if you don't do something about your stress is going to do something about you. And he meant that I was going to have a catastrophic health event. And I didn't pay a lot of attention to that. And I just kept working. I didn't take another day off for an entire year. But at the end of that year, I had so isolated myself that I began to believe that I was the only person that this was happening to. I began to believe that everybody was picking on me, and I believed that there was something wrong with me. And that's what this does. Silence is safer than honesty, because when teachers believe the truth will cost them more than it will help them heal, they stay silent. And all of this is the result of the unspoken rule. And the unspoken rule is this: if teaching is hurting your mental health, then you must be the problem. And I find that to be the ultimate gaslight of teachers. I mean, because it could never be the workload. Could it? It couldn't be the fact that teachers have to work on average 15 hours a week overtime just to complete their job. It couldn't be the endless expectations that flow from the top down and they land in the teacher's classroom. It couldn't be any of those, could it? I mean, it couldn't be the lack of support. It couldn't be because there's a system that's been put together that's been going on for 150 years now or however long. It's archaic in its approach. It couldn't be any of that. It must be that we are doing something wrong. And that is the unspoken rule that is destroying the mental health of teachers. It is simply gaslighting. Now, here's how the rule operates. First of all, that rule isn't written down anywhere. You can't find the rule. Again, it's not going to be in your district manual. It's not going to be in any of your teacher books. It's not there, but it is reinforced culturally. Now, I say that with great confidence because at one time I thought that was only me. I thought that I was the only one that felt that way. But now, after a full year of talking with almost 500,000 teachers around the world, it is my firm conviction that this is a cultural and systemic problem in education. And I'll tell you where it shows up. It shows up in the tone, oftentimes, of our leadership. It shows up in our evaluations a lot of times. And it shows up in comparison, being compared to other teachers that seemingly have it all together. And it teaches teachers to self-monitor and to self-blame. That is what that rule does. And that is how it operates. Now, the question that you may have is, if that's the case, then why in the world do teachers keep going along with this? And there are 4 reasons why. Number 1 is fear. Teachers are afraid. Teachers are afraid of repercussions. They're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of being labeled as unable to handle the tough job of teaching. There's fear of evaluation consequences. There's fear of being or appearing to be weak. Number 2, when teaching is who you are, struggling feels like a personal collapse. Teaching then becomes an identity and not a vocation. And I want you to hear me clearly. Teaching is not your identity. It is a job, and it has to be approached that way. And when we struggle, those struggles feel like a threat to our self-worth because our identity and our job, they begin to fuse together. Number 3, calling confusion. We often hear this a lot of times in the teaching circles, that teaching is a calling. And I don't have a single problem with that thought process at all. But there is a belief that when something is a calling, that sacrifice equals faithfulness. Endurance becomes the moral currency. And somewhere along the way, we got this idea that suffering got mistaken for faithfulness. The two are not the same. Faithfulness, it is showing up every day. It is doing the best that we can. It is sometimes going the extra mile. But what it is not a reckless abandonment of our identity. It is not an abandonment of taking care of ourselves. It is not an abandonment of our values. And it's not an abandonment of our physical and mental and emotional health. Number 4, comparison pressure. Everybody else seems like they're doing just fine. Everybody else is able to manage the job. Nobody else is struggling in the same way that I'm struggling. And so struggling isolates, or at least that's the way we feel. And when our identity is tied to endurance, the struggles or the need for rest or recovery oftentimes feels like a failure on our part. Another question that you might have is, how do we take care of ourselves as teachers? What do we do? And the answer to that, from my perspective, is very simple. Again, we are a faith-forward channel, and it's not because we want to be offensive or anything like that, because we don't. But that's just who we are. And our core verse at Teacher Talk is this, Proverbs chapter 4, verse number 23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. When the inner person, the person that you are on the inside, when it gets out of balance and doesn't readily get back into balance, before long, life begins to spiral. Everybody out there knows exactly what I'm talking about. And so healing and teaching doesn't begin with fixing yourself or working harder. It begins by guarding our hearts. Because for far too long, We have allowed things to get into our life, external issues into our life, and it has disturbed our internal person. And so I want to just say that guarding your heart is not pulling away from students. It's not even pulling away from work. It's protecting the source of things that care for you. When the heart is depleted, everything else downstream suffers. Wisdom does not demand endurance without limits. And that's why we talk about boundaries here all the time. You have to protect your source, and your source is your inner person. And the way that you do that is with boundaries. You have to set personal and professional boundaries. Down in the description box, there is a free resource down there for you. It's Reclaim Your Limits. Jump down there and grab it. It's one of our top free resources, and it'll help you set those boundaries really well. Now, there are drivers of healing. The first thing is awareness. We have to become aware of what's going on, and we have to move from what's wrong with me to what's wrong with the environment that I'm in and what it's requiring of me. Do you see the difference? Whenever we're up there on the other side, where all the blame game is, where the rule, the unspoken rule is at work, we're the problem. But if you want to heal, you have to properly identify the problem. Now, there could be things that you're struggling with, and you may need to make some adjustments, namely putting boundaries in place, but the system, that's not your problem. Being gaslit into believing that you should be more, that you should do more, that you should be able to handle more, that's not your problem. And so we don't ask what's wrong with me. We ask what's wrong with the environment that I'm in and what it's requiring me to do. Now, the cool thing about awareness is awareness 100% automatically breaks the shame cycle. No longer do you have to feel ashamed. Ashamed that you can't handle it, ashamed that you can't do this, or ashamed that you're not able to keep up with that over there. And that is the beginning of healing, because you can't heal if you keep personalizing things. Number 2, you need permission instead of guilt. You need to see rest as optional and not as earned. Taking a break, taking a day off, taking some time away, that is not something that you have to earn or I have to earn. That is something that we can do because we are people. Rest is a requirement. You need to recognize it as a requirement and see rest as a protective measure and not as weakness, regardless of what anybody says. It is not weak to need to take time off and get away. Now, I got to tell you, at the height of burnout, I absolutely struggled with that issue. And in fact, that's what got me there. I used to get so mad. I would see teachers take all this time off, and we would all have to go out and we would have to work on all this other stuff, and we'd have to make up and pick up the slack. I used to get so mad. But you know what? Looking back, they were the smart ones. They were the wise ones, and they understood that there were just times that they had to get away. And that's what you and I do. You see, guilt keeps teachers locked up in a depletion cycle. Permission opens the door to recovery. Isn't that cool? Now, number 3, reframed identity instead of incompetence. We got to make a shift from needing help means I'm failing to seeking support is a form of wisdom and self-care. So if you haven't figured it out yet, we're working on mindset issues. All right. The system has ingrained a mindset into us, a way to think. And we are using the wisdom of the proverb to guard our hearts above all else, because from it flow the issues of life, to take that mindset and turn it up on top of its head in a healthy way. You see, before, needing help, that means I've got a problem. Something's wrong with me. I'm not doing things right. But now all of a sudden, Seeking support is a form of wisdom and self-care. And here's the reason why. Because identity fusion is one of the most dangerous parts about burnout. When your identity gets tied to what you do, you will burn out because what you do will ultimately fail and will not provide you emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually with the things that you need to be healthy. Healing requires separating worth from your output. Number 4, safe connections instead of silence. And what we're going to shift from carrying everything alone to sharing honestly in spaces that are psychologically safe. And that's what Teacher Talk is all about, is we have become a community. We become a community of teachers where teachers come. They're able to share. They're able to share their tea and not worry about it getting back to their administration or worrying about other teachers, finding out what they struggle with. That's what Teacher Talk is all about. And you need that because silence intensifies burnout, but community normalizes reality. Isn't that cool? So healing doesn't begin when the system changes. It begins when teachers stop turning system pressure into self-judgment. Caring deeply should not cost you your well-being. Teachers deserve to be whole humans, and you're not broken for feeling this way. So teacher, if you feel that way, I want you to know that you're not alone, that you're not broken, but most of all, I want you to learn about another unspoken rule, and you can see it in that video right there. But more than that, stay strong and keep teaching.